The galaxy thought silence meant weakness. But when humanity said nothing, the silence echoed louder than a declaration of war. It wasn't rage. It wasn't defiance. It was something far more terrifying to those in power. It was final. A species known for compassion, creativity, and maddening perseverance simply walked away. And the Council, so certain of its dominance, would never recover. The starship Meridian glided through the darkness like a silver needle threading the stars, headed toward Nexus Prime, a massive Council station floating above. A gray, dead world. Towering spires jutted from its surface, blinking with cold light, housing the diplomatic elite of 200 alien civilizations. Ambassador Jack Harrison stood at the observation deck, hands clasped behind his back, staring. At the approaching structure, his reflection in the glass looked tired. Years of negotiations, of trying to do the right thing in a galaxy that prized power over mercy, had etched deep lines into his face. His hair had faded from chestnut to iron gray, but his eyes still held the same stubborn fire he had when he first stepped off Earth's soil into the unknown. "We're approaching final docking," said Captain Lisa Morgan as she stepped beside him. Her voice was crisp, as was her uniform. Younger, sharp-minded, always professional, she'd commanded ships through battles and evacuations. But nothing had prepared her for a diplomatic ambush. "They want our credentials again," she added. Frowning, "Give them what they want," Harrison replied, without looking away from the viewport. "They summoned us. Let them pretend they hold the leash." 3 weeks ago, the Council's message had arrived like a bullet. Humanity was to appear before them immediately. No pleasantries, no explanation. Just charges of unauthorized interference, destabilizing trade, and spreading dangerous ideological contamination. The kind of charges criminals receive, not rescuers. "They didn't accuse us of weapons trafficking," Morgan muttered. "They accused us of kindness." "That's what frightens them," Harrison said. "We help without asking for payment. That's poison to those who sell salvation." The Meridian slid through the outer security grid without incident. Nexus Prime loomed, its architecture like an ancient cathedral mashed with a machine hive. Docking arms unfolded. Clamp locks hissed and latched. Everything looked routine, but the air on board had gone tight. The crew didn't speak. They didn't have to. Everyone felt a dot in the loading corridor. Harrison's diplomatic team assembled. Dr. Helen Carter, Earth's foremost xenobiologist, adjusted her tablet, dark hair tied in a no-nonsense bun. Engineer Paul Rodriguez, soft-spoken and brilliant, double-checked a case of technical data. Colonel Susan Blake, their military liaison, stood perfectly still, every inch a disciplined soldier in civilian clothing. The corridor connected to the station. The gravity here was heavier, calibrated for the larger species that dominated council politics. Wide walkways buzzed with beings of every shape and size. Feathered merchants, scaled diplomats, crystalline entities humming with data. Some paused and gave the human delegation a nod. A few even smiled. Harrison noted every face, especially the ones who looked away. "Not many allies here," Carter murmured. "Where are the Nexari?" "They carry." "They didn't come," Harrison replied, "or weren't invited." Past security checkpoints and through ceremonial gates they went, halls designed to intimidate, to remind newcomers that they were guests in someone else's order. The council chamber itself was colossal, a circular arena with hundreds of raised seats encircling a central podium, carved with alien script and symbolism. It was meant to inspire awe. All Harrison saw was a trap. Their assigned seats were clearly marked, defended row. "Subtle," Colonel Blake whispered dryly. The chamber was nearly full. On the left, the Velhari sat draped in shimmering fabrics, their angular features unreadable. On the right, the Zairian generals, reptilian, massive, still wearing ceremonial armor that creaked with menace. Behind them, the Arctonian delegation, humanoid but smaller, faces marked with the cold calm of ruthless economists. They stacked the room. Morgan said, That's the game. Harrison muttered. Council speaker Vextory entered with full ceremonial movement, a being of 8 arms and translucent skin. Her voice augmented to resonate across the chamber. The Galactic Collective Council calls this session to order. She declared. Silence fell. The translation feeds kicked. In Harrison stood tall. We are here to address charges of ideological contamination, unauthorized intervention, and destabilization of galactic order by the species known as humanity. There it was, spoken like law, but it felt like a verdict. Doctor Carter leaned closer and whispered, "They think compassion is a disease." "It is," Harrison replied. "To empires built on suffering." The first prosecutor stepped forward. Valhari Trade Minister Kelina, tall, ethereal, and venomous. Behind her formal smile, for over 1,000 years, the Valhari have supported interstellar trade. We've kept the galaxy supplied for a price. That price funds the roads, the ships, the medicines. But humanity? Her eyes slid toward the delegation like a blade. Humanity gives away what should be sold. A massive holographic display appeared. Trade maps, shipping routes, profit charts, all bleeding red. They broke centuries of balance, Kelena said coldly. Not with weapons, with generosity. Some in the chamber murmured in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. They gave medicine to plague worlds for free, Kelena continued. Food to drought-stricken colonies, defensive systems to primitives. What happens when the gifts stop? Dependency. Collapse. She returned to her seat, pleased with herself. Harrison did not move. The next prosecutor rose. General Ceres of the Xerians. Massive, armored, his scales clicking softly as he approached the dais. The strong survive. The weak perish. That is the way of all life, he rumbled. Humanity has poisoned the galaxy with weakness. He showed worlds where human peacekeepers had stood between would-be conquerors and helpless colonies without ever firing a shot, just standing, just existing. That was enough. They protect the weak and prevent conquest. That is unnatural. That is interference with evolution. More murmurs. Ceres stepped down, eyes burning with fury. Finally. Corporate Director Malreth of the Arctonian Alliance stood, slight, unassuming, with eyes like calculating machines. The greatest threat, he said, is not weapons. It is ideology. He showed mining operations halted by human environmental engineers, labor uprisings sparked by human teachers. Worlds that once turned prophets now demanded rights. Hopes, he said with distaste. They spread hope. When he finished, the room turned as one to face humanity. Ambassador Jack Harrison stood. The lights dimmed slightly. The air, already heavy, seemed to hold its breath. He looked at the faces surrounding him. Then, calmly, he said, "We do not deny the charges." And the galaxy leaned in, stunned. Asterisk. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "We do not deny the charges." Every being in the chamber stilled, expecting legal maneuvering, denial, or deflection. But not this. Not quiet acceptance. Ambassador Harrison's voice remained steady. "We gave medical aid to the Kari. We shared food-growing technology with the Nexari. We positioned our ships between raiders and undefended colonies. We didn't do it for profit or for power. We did it because we could." Council murmurs rolled like storm winds. Several delegates exchanged glances. This wasn't a defense. It was a confession. But it didn't feel like guilt. Dr. Helen Carter rose next, her fingers gripping the tablet she had carried across light years. The holographic display flared to life again, but this time there were no trade maps or conquest simulations. Only faces. A Kalari child running through a clean village square. Nexari elders harvesting crops where dust storms once ruled. A school on Ythra 2, where children of 3 different species sat together learning to write in their own tongues. I've listened to accusations of economic sabotage. Dr. Carter began, but I ask you to consider the cost of silence. She tapped her tablet, and a wave of images poured forth. Medical records, environmental scans, before and after shots of barren planets blooming with green. We didn't just drop aid from the sky. We trained doctors, engineers, builders. We didn't create dependency. We created resilience. We taught them to build without us. A few in the gallery looked away. Others stared. Transfixed engineer Paul Rodriguez followed, his soft voice cutting through the quiet. They say we destabilized technological evolution, but we never gave them tools they couldn't understand. We helped them cross gaps they were already approaching, just faster, smarter. He brought up technical schematics, irrigation systems built using native materials, medication formulas that could be replicated in basic labs, defense drones powered by solar energy from their own suns. We didn't push them ahead, he said. We just stopped them from dying before they got there. Colonel Susan Blake stepped into the center ring next. Her boots rang like hammers in the silence. I've led peacekeeping missions on 13 worlds. We never invaded. Never fired the first shot. Our mission was simple. Be present. Make the violent hesitate. The display shifted again. Battle footage. Human ships orbiting a defenseless colony. Raiders turning back. Not because they were defeated, but because they knew they couldn't. Win without consequences. If protecting the innocent is a crime, Blake said, then we are guilty. Proudly. The gallery rippled with movement. Here and there, a few scattered beings began to nod. Small, tentative gestures. Eyes were changing. Then came the moment none expected. Harrison touched his console. The final display shimmered into life. Not council data, but something rawer, realer. Personal dot, the face of a Calari mother appeared. Her voice choked but clear. My daughter was dying, she said. We couldn't afford Valhari medicine. Then the humans came. They gave us the cure and showed our doctors how to make more. My daughter lives because they didn't ask who we were. They just helped. Another testimony followed. A Nexari. Farmer, our world was crumbling. Arctonians offered to buy it for minerals, but the humans showed us how to reclaim the land. Now we grow again, and we are free. A miner, a teacher, a child. Dozens of faces, dozens of voices, each one a thread. In the quiet revolution humanity had sparked. And each one proof that they hadn't created weakness. They'd inspired strength. When the last voice faded, the chamber sat in stunned silence. Harrison looked out at the sea of representatives. You accuse us of breaking your systems, he said. But your systems were already broken? We didn't destabilize you. We exposed the rock. Trade Minister Kellena stood, fury etched into every movement. These are emotional appeals, anecdotes, irrelevant. Her alive. Harrison cut in, sharply. Our lives irrelevant? General CRE slammed a fist into his armrest. You've made the weak think they matter, and now they resist what is natural. No, Blake said, stepping forward. Now they survive. Isn't that more natural? Malor's voice slithered in. Survival is costly. Stability is built on order. Humans bring chaos. Then maybe, Harrison said quietly, order isn't worth the cost. Speaker Vex 3 raised one of her many hands. Enough. The voices ceased. We will recess while Council considers humanity's defense. You may wait in the delegation quarters. Without a word, Harrison and his team stood and left. The silence in their wake was louder than the chaos that had come before Dot in the secure observation lounge. None of them spoke for several minutes. The tension wrapped around them like a noose. Outside, across the windows, the stars drifted by. Slowly, uncaring, they won't let this go, Rodriguez finally said. We embarrassed them, Blake nodded. We showed that compassion works. That's the most dangerous idea in this place. Carter looked at Harrison. Do you think they'll listen? No, he said. But I don't think we're here to win. Then why? Morgan asked. Because maybe, just maybe. Harrison looked up at the swirling cosmos. Someone out there is listening. A soft chime sounded. The council had reached a verdict. Time to return. The Meridian's crew stood as one as there. Delegation marched back to the chamber. No handcuffs. No guards. Just grim respect. A silent honor guard walking toward judgment. The chamber was full again, more so than before. Word had spread. Beings of every shape now crowded the upper galleries, watching. Speaker Vexry rose once more. Her voice was sharp as crystal. The council has reached a decision. She paused, letting the weight of it build, on the charge of excessive intervention in primitive development. Humanity is found guilty. No one moved. On the charge of destabilizing galactic order. Guilty. Stillness. On the charge of spreading dangerous ideological contamination. Guilty. A quiet gasp. Someone in the gallery stood up. Another did too. The murmuring began. Humanity, Vexery continued, will cease all unauthorized aid. Efforts. They will pay reparations of 500 billion credits. They will submit all further activities to council oversight. And they will issue a formal apology to this body for their violations. Silence. Then Harrison stepped forward, slowly, calmly. He looked at every face. Every blinking eye, every polished robe and armored chest. He leaned into the microphone. His voice was quiet. Then we will walk away. The chamber erupted. Asterisk. The uproar hit like thunder. Voices from every corner of the chamber, outraged, stunned, confused, all crashing into one another. Ambassadors shouted. Military leaders pounded tables. Corporate delegates sputtered demands. The idea itself was unthinkable. Humanity wasn't supposed to walk away. Clarify, Speaker Vextry demanded, her voice struggling to regain control. Your statement, Ambassador Harrison. Do you intend to contest the ruling through the appropriate appeals process? Or... We're not appealing, Harrison said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We're leaving. We withdraw from all council operations, effective immediately. Someone laughed, loud, harsh, bitter. General Ciares, you think you can survive without us? That you can just leave this council and keep your colonies, your ships, your standing? No, Harrison replied. We don't expect anything. That's the difference between us and you. He turned to leave. You dare. Trade Minister Kelena shouted, rising from her seat. We have issued legal demands. You owe reparations. Harrison stopped walking. Slowly, he turned his head. Did you ever ask the Carey what they thought you were owed? He said, or the Nixari, or the dozens of other species who suffered while you counted credits. Kelena recoiled as if slapped. Without our support, Maurith said coldly, the galaxy will revert to chaos. You can't maintain your alliances without oversight. That's the idea, Colonel Blake said, stepping up beside Harrison. We won't be part of your system. Let it collapse under its own weight. Speaker Vextry pounded the ceremonial. Staff 3 times, the universal symbol to restore order. But the noise didn't fade. The gallery had started moving. Delegates weren't just speaking anymore. They were leaving their seats. The human delegation exited the chamber in silence, and the world shifted. By the time the Meridian launched from Docking Bay 77, half the station's sectors were buzzing. With rumors, humanity had not just refused to cooperate, they had walked. No negotiation, no protest, no begging. They had shown the council everything, exposed every wound, and then said call on goodbye. On board the Meridian, Captain Morgan stood in the command deck, watching the display as Nexus Prime shrank behind them. They'll come after us, she said. Quietly. Maybe, Harrison replied. But not yet. They're too busy realizing what just happened. He turned to the comms officer. Transmit the signal. Full withdrawal protocols. All assets. All aid. Everywhere. Yes, sir. One command. Sent across relay stations, encrypted jump buoys, stealth drones. A single pulse that set in motion. Something vast. From the core worlds to the frontier stars. Humanity disengaged. Hospitals on low-orbit satellites dimmed their lights and offloaded patients to local governments. Teaching stations beamed farewell messages to students before shuttering. Transmissions. Peacekeeper patrols, once stationed in neutral zones between warring planets, withdrew quietly and without fanfare. They didn't fight. They didn't accuse. They just left. Within a week, the first cracks appeared. In the outer rim, a Nexari farming colony suffered a locust blight. Their automated pest control drones, human-built, solar-charged, no longer received maintenance. The infestation spread. Crops failed. The Zairian raiding fleets returned to the border systems. For the first time in 10 years, the Ethran colonies broadcast distress signals. There was no response. On Kaleri Prime, hospitals ran out of medicine. The Velhari offered to sell crates of outdated supplies at 3 times the original price. In the mining colonies on Vega Prime, workers began striking again. Without human mediators, corporate enforcers responded with force. Protests turned to riots. Riots turned to rebellion. Still, the council held its line. This is temporary. Vextri insisted in public broadcasts. The council will compensate. Aid will be reassigned. Trade will resume. The galaxy will stabilize. But the council had never helped for free. And now, there were debts coming due. Inside the private halls of the council, panic brewed behind. Closed doors. Reassigning trade networks will take years, muttered Kelena. Their aid architecture was decentralized, embedded, adaptive. We don't even know how they coordinated some of it. They gave primitive worlds independence, CREs growled. Now those same worlds expect to keep it. It's worse than that, said Narith. They've changed how people think. Their ideology is spreading faster now that we've punished them. They've become martyrs. Vextri stood silently at the central map, watching the shifting tide of reports. Star systems that once pledged loyalty to the council were going dark. Not in rebellion, but in quiet retreat. They were following the humans' example, too. You understand? Malrith whispered. They didn't just walk away from us. They made others realize they can too. No one spoke? The silence was no longer ignorance, it was terror. On Earth, no celebration occurred. No parades, no speeches, no grand announcement of defiance. Instead, people worked. They rerouted aid to species who had reached out privately, outside council space. They opened channels to worlds that wanted to learn, not trade. They built. Ships not for war, but for exploration. We'll keep helping, Harrison told the Global Unity Council. Just not through them. If others want to join us, they'll know where to find us. The Meridian's bridge was quiet again. Stars passed in a gentle rhythm. Morgan leaned back in her chair. You think they'll ever understand what we did? Harrison's expression was unreadable. Understanding comes too late, most times. Outside, the galaxy churned . And at its edge, humanity moved forward . Alone . But not in retreat . In freedom. Asterisk. The council chamber had never been so quiet . News spread faster than any official channel could contain. Delegates whispered in corridors. Translations blurred across languages, across species. It didn't matter how they said it. Humanity was gone, not defeated. Not sanctioned . Gone . In the systems they had touched. The ones that had once flourished under quiet protection and generous assistance were already beginning to unravel . At first. Council leaders tried to spin the situation. They told the galaxy that nothing had changed. That aid programs would resume through official, regulated channels. That the council would take over humanitarian efforts, using approved corporate partners and military logistics. But the galaxy was no longer listening. Because the truth was simpler, more devastating. No other species could do what humans had done. In the outer sectors, small colonies that once thrived under human guidance began to slip. On Nixari 3, crop yields dropped by 60% after the water filtration systems failed. They weren't complex machines. In fact, they were brilliantly simple, made with local materials and powered by solar panels. But without Earth's quiet check-ins, maintenance guides, and spare part shipments, the knowledge started to fade. Generations that had depended on cooperation now found themselves isolated. Nixari officials reached out to the council. They requested replacement part, even just the schematics, the Velhari trade. Consortium responded with an invoice For blueprints, the price exceeded the colony's entire annual export value. On Etheron 4, raiders returned in force, this time with no human patrols to intercept them. The Etheron Planetary Council sent emergency requests for assistance. The Zairian military responded, not with help, but with annexation. The testimonies came in waves. We called. No one came, said a Yithran child, staring into a local news. Holocom. Our skies used to be protected, a Nexari elder whispered. We watched the stars, knowing someone watched with us. Now we are alone, small, sorrowful voices. Unimportant, the council once thought. Now those voices echoed across the stars, and more species began to ask a dangerous question. Why were the humans the only ones who ever helped without asking for something in return? Inside the council itself, fractures appeared. Some delegates from lesser powers began to protest openly. The ambassador from the Carry accused the council of hypocrisy and cowardice. Where were you when our children died? She asked. We remember who saved us, and it was not you. Her microphone was cut. Security escorted her out, but her words stayed. On a fringe broadcast network, her speech replayed over and over, translated into 42 languages. Uploaded to every public data grid. Viewed 1 billion times in 3 days. She had said what many now felt. The council was never the center of civilization. Humanity had been, and now it wasn't there. In a shadowed conference chamber, the most powerful voices in the galaxy sat behind sealed doors. We have underestimated them, Kelena said bitterly, pacing like a caged predator. We thought taking their voice would break them. Instead, it made them myth. It's ideology, Malrith snapped. It spreads like a disease. That's what we said at the trial, and now it's happening. No, Sirius growled. This isn't disease, it's insurgency. We let them walk out. We must bring them back. Force them back. Vextri, the council speaker, had remained quiet until now. No, she said. Softly got all eyes turned. We judged them guilty. We enforced our laws, and they left as free people might. We gave them no choice. Kelena hissed. No, Vextri repeated. We simply gave them no reason to stay. The room went silent. And for the first time, the council realized its mistake hadn't been in judgment. It had been in assumption. They had assumed humanity needed them. They had assumed humanity feared them. They had assumed silence meant surrender. They had never imagined that silence could be a boundary. A final one, elsewhere, far beyond council space, aboard a new class of human exploration vessel. Ambassador Harrison stood before a view of a rising alien sun. They had begun launching ships again, not to patrol, not to enforce, but to reconnect, this time on their terms. From Earth, the signal had gone out. We're still here. If you want help, find us. If you want peace, speak with us. If you want freedom, walk with us. And worlds were listening. Small worlds. Poor worlds. Broken, desperate worlds. The ones who had once been told their suffering was just the cost of progress. And slowly, system by system, beings began to leave the council behind. In one quiet message sent across encrypted relays, a Nexari leader wrote, You saved us once. They never did. You taught us how to survive. We will teach others now. Thank you. And another, from a child in a distant school. They said you were wrong, but you were kind. That's why I remember. And on a distant moon, a group of former miners gathered around a statue built not of stone, but of scrap metal and old machinery, a tribute to the first humans who came not with weapons, but with tools. No plaques. Just a simple phrase etched in 20 languages. They asked for nothing, and gave us everything. Asterisk, it began as a whisper. One colony refusing council protection. One minor world rejecting trade agreements. One people remembering what the others wanted them to forget. And then it became a tide. By the end of the cycle, 27 worlds had withdrawn from council treaties. 12 declared themselves neutral territories. 7 openly pledged allegiance to no government, but shared one common truth. that when the stars turned cold, it was humanity who brought warmth. And now that warmth was gone, that something else lingered. The idea, the belief that a better galaxy wasn't built with dominance or trade monopolies or conquest, but with compassion, cooperation, and defiance against systems that thrived on silence. And it terrified the council because they could punish a species, but they could not unteach what had already been taught. On Nexus Prime, Speaker Vex-3 stood alone at the center of the great chamber, surrounded by hollow silence. The rows of delegates had thinned. Many seats sat vacant, some by quiet protest, others by fearful retreat. The council still existed, but it no longer ruled. The latest reports lay scattered across her podium. Riots in Velhari marketplaces, as food prices spiked beyond affordability. CAPAIRI and fleets overstretched, trying to suppress rebellion in newly declared independent protectorates. Entire sectors now openly broadcasting praise for the human departure, as it had come to be called. And far worse, Earth's frequency had gone silent. They had stopped responding. No. Trade.no messages. No warnings. Only absence. And the silence screamed louder than words ever could. Light years away, a small vessel cruised the edge of known space. A research ship retrofitted for teaching and outreach. On board, Dr. Helen Carter sat before a class of young alien students. Her voice calm and kind as she explained basic principles of medicine. No, not because it's profitable, she said, smiling gently at a curious, feathered child. Because it saves lives. In another system, Colonel Blake helped train a volunteer defense force on a remote moon, teaching communities how to defend themselves, not with weapons, but with preparation, unity, and courage. Rodriguez walked dusty ground where nothing had ever grown before and taught farmers how to read soil, harvest water, and see potential in dead things. And on a quiet observation deck aboard a flagship now charting unknown stars, Jack Harrison stood watching the galaxy drift past. Morgan joined him. They're calling it the Great Departure, she said. There's poems, paintings, a few revolts too. Let them, Harrison replied. They needed something to believe in. We gave it to them. Morgan tilted her head. Did we do the right thing, Jack? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the stars. See that? She followed his gaze. A distant system, too faint for most ships to register, now pulsing with soft light. Human-built satellites were still in orbit, even after the formal withdrawal. And below, the planet bloomed green. They'll survive, he said, because we showed them how. She nodded. But the council, they were never our future, Harrison said. We looked them in the eye and they saw themselves, hollow, cold, dying, and we reminded them of what they once could have been. Morgan stared out into the dark. Do you think they'll come after us? They already are, Harrison said quietly. With propaganda, sanctions, threats, but not war. He looked at her and smiled, tired but proud. No, because if they attack us now, they'll prove we were right. The stars moved on. In corners of the galaxy that once whispered in fear. Hope returned, carried not by armies, but by storytellers, teachers, farmers, builders. The idea of Earth, of what humans stood for, had become more than a planet. It had become a philosophy. One child told another. One refugee helped a neighbor. One ship with no flag arrived just when it was needed. Humanity was gone from the center of galactic power, but they had never been more present. Not in name, but in action. And the council, once the heart of galactic order, now sat in the shadow of the greatest act of defiance ever recorded. A silent walk away. No protests. No speeches. Just quiet footsteps echoing across the stars. Final line. The day humanity left, they didn't shout or fight or plead. They simply walked away, and in doing so, taught the galaxy that silence can be the loudest cry for change. Asterisk.